I know you heard me on the radio. Flexing. She loved the sound of my voice, it's the best thing. Daydreaming of the jazz all day. Pick up the phone late night with Larry K. I know you heard me on the radio. Flexing. She loved the sound of my voice, it's the best thing. Daydreaming of the jazz all day. Pick up the phone late night with Larry K.
Scarlet Knights fans, welcome to Night Watch. I am Larry K. The Scarlet Knights football team snaps a 4-game losing streak. Thank God. We are now 5-4, 2 conference wins, over 500 this season that was poised to be a storybook year. Maybe not a storybook year, but poised to be a really, huge next step. And Schiano 2.0 has stumbled quite a bit. And we know it stumbled quite a bit, right? It has, with a 4-game losing streak, to the likes of UCLA. You thought we were going to lose to UCLA. You thought we might lose to Nebraska, but not the way we did with the defense playing so well. And then we got absolutely dominated by Wisconsin. Things were looking bleak. But we took the bye week. In Schiano's words, Joe Harris-Simiak, the defensive coordinator in high acclaim, held in high regard, breaks that thing down, tears it down to the studs, and rebuilds it. You see Kaj Sanders starting. You see Al-Shadi Salam getting more snaps. Keep guys like Longer Beam fresh. You see Walker on the edge, a converted, wide out to tight end to now rush end, looking, and Schiano's talked about it. I mean, looking big. Maybe that's the next developmental guy. Now, we're not going to swing on a pendulum like crazy people on this channel. We're going to keep it real. We're going to keep it balanced. There were some concerns about development in this program, being that starters go down, and we have suffered many, many, many injuries this year. And news on Needham and Wright, no news. Schiano says we will know with the availability report Saturday. If there's any season-ending injuries there, I guess we'll know Saturday. Maybe a little before if guys go to consultations and get medical feedback and whatnot before then. So the injuries keep piling up. Now, Kyle Monangai didn't play last week. Schiano said he was very close and he had to basically protect him from himself. So we should see Kyle Monangai play this week. But here's the thing. There was a lot of concern about how has the development of the program gone? What's the problem? Is this program still a developmental program? Being that you get guys in the second string in there and they don't look very good. They look lost. They don't look like they can keep pace. Well, this last week against Minnesota, who, by the way, came into the game 6-3, who has some impressive wins, we line up with them and we get some of these younger guys and, whether it's Benjamin, whether it's Raymond, whether it's KJ Duff, whether it is Ian Strong, and we already knew about some of those guys, but not all of them. And then whether it's Sanders, Walker, some of these other guys, you're starting to see there is development, and there's development of guys who make leaps and bounds, strides from coming into the program to getting to the top part of the depth chart. What hurts a team like Rutgers is when you have so many star players who have come from where they were as recruits to the pinnacle, not only of Rutgers, but to the pinnacle of the Big Ten, like Mo Toure. And those guys go down and you can't easily replace them, or you can't even get any semblance of close to that play from the guys on the two deep. It's a tough situation. And when you're playing teams as talented with speed and athleticism as even a UCLA, who's looking a little better and stock's a little bit up since that game with us anyway, it's going to be hard to make up for that. But we do see some signs that there are guys in the program who can do things, and hats off to the coaching staff doing what they did to get us to a win against Minnesota. So now we go against our Big Ten brother that we came into the Big Ten with, foe who we've played here and there when they were in the ACC and we were in the Big East, right down 95, only one state over, the Maryland Terrapins. We have to go on the road. It's a 6 p.m. kickoff, kind of an awkward start time. Going to be kind of annoying to wait all day Saturday to get to that game, but it is what it is. Those taking the trip might be tough to drive back. I'm not going to make the trip this year. I was looking forward to maybe making the trip. I don't think I'm going to make it. Maryland, all-time 4-8. We're 4-8 against Maryland. We are on a 3-game losing streak against Maryland. And when we first came into the Big Ten with Maryland, we kind of had a back and forth relationship. We finished the season with them many times, and we kind of had a back and forth relationship. That 2014 year, we have that comeback win. We have a really memorable, good season that year, and we go back and forth after that. They kind of become our peers in the Big Ten. They seem to sometimes play some of the powerhouses closer as the season goes on, but we always kind of had a tit for tat, and we were able to keep pace. But the last 3 years under Greg Schiano, getting in position for bowl games, getting in position where we think we can end the season on a high note or at least in a competitive game, we have been run out of the stadium. And it goes before that with Ash too, but you got to look at the back and forth. The last 3 years, so not the first year Schiano was here. We kind of redeemed ourselves from getting killed in the Ash years. But the last 3 years, 21 through 23, we get clobbered by Maryland. It doesn't matter what's going on. We're getting clobbered. And part of the issue was Tagovailoa, Tua's younger brother, was there. Taulia was there. And he was a tough matchup for us. But I think Maryland goes beyond that for Rutgers, especially in these Schiano years. And I think Maryland's a tough matchup for Rutgers no matter who the quarterback is. And now I said that going into this final 4-game stretch, one of the interesting things was that some of the better teams are going to be better matchups for us, i.e. Minnesota, good team. But Minnesota, a better matchup for us than, say, a UCLA, who's not a good team, but had faster players and better athletes on the perimeter who were racking up yards after the catch and things like that that gave us fits defensively. Going into this 4-game final stretch, a team like Minnesota, who's a good team, they don't have that same level of speed and athleticism on the edge. Now, they have talented players, but they don't have that same type of talent that gives Rutgers such a fit all the time. So it's great we got out of Minnesota with the win. But going forward in these last 4 games, Maryland may be one of the toughest tests for us, not because they're per se the best team, but because they present matchup problems for us, and they continue to do so. So let's dive into it. Maryland, by the way, is 4-5 on the season. Interesting season thus far, right? They beat UConn early. They take a loss to MSU in their Big Ten opener. They beat Villanova and they beat UVA, but then they take a loss to surging Indiana, who has been very, very impressive this year. They take a loss to Northwestern. Then they beat USC in kind of a crazy game. If you didn't see this game against USC, USC visited Maryland. So coming from the West Coast to the East Coast, it's really kind of a back and forth game. But in all honesty, USC kind of looks like it's got the leg up for most of the game. It had a very elongated end of the first half. Teams trying to keep the ball, trying to elongate it, trying to score points. USC all but has the game wrapped up at the end of that game. USC goes to kick a field goal, doesn't get the field goal, and Maryland is in great position after that to go in and win the game. And they do, in fact, win the game late in it, and USC is like beating themselves up because they really had it in hand. But something to pay attention to is in that USC game, one of the things that was evident was that despite USC looking to be mostly, in command most of the game, Maryland was able to hang with USC because Maryland had a lot of talent on the perimeter, a lot of playmakers, a lot of speed, a lot of guys in that wide receiver position that are really tough to stop. And so Maryland, when it counted, was able to score and was able to keep pace with and beat USC, and they won 29-28. Now they follow that up with a loss to Minnesota, a decisive loss, 48-23. They go down to Minnesota, and then they get pummeled by Oregon, 39-18, and they're coming off that Oregon loss against us this week. Now, it's an interesting team, right? Because they're up and down, and I don't think it's as volatile. I think it's more volatile than Rutgers, right? I think Rutgers is up and down in the win-loss column, but Rutgers kind of has this theme where if they're playing a team they can match up with helmet to helmet, and they can play their game running the football, and now we're seeing Ethan Kaliakmanis really airing it out properly to some of these big body receivers and even some of the speedier, efficient receivers like a Dymere Miller. If we're able to play our game on offense and be a little bit methodical, but also make up for it with some chunk plays, and we're able on defense to slow a team down to some extent. Now, we saw with Minnesota the first time in a while where our pressures on the QB turned into actual sacks on the QB, where our opportunistic defensive play actually led to turnovers and actually led to turnovers in, really opportune places that led to scores. We saw in Nebraska, we had a punt block that got us to the 2-yard line. We weren't able to convert. That's different this week when we're able to convert and get the touchdown, turn the game around really with the pass to Ian Strong. So when we're able to create those plays and we have a chance on defense and we're able to keep the offense in front of us and kind of go tit for tat a little better, we're able to play. And when teams just out athletic us and just dominate us on the perimeter with speed, and we can't keep the offense in front of us, it's hard for our offense to catch up. That's not really volatile. It's volatile on the win-loss column. It's volatile on our souls and our hearts as Rutgers fans, but it's not as volatile as far as ups and downs in games. Maryland's more volatile. I mean, they're going to go in and look great and fluid, and then they're just going to get cabined and kept at bay by other teams. So interesting team. They're going to want the win. They're going to want to get back to 500. They're playing at home, and they've owned Rutgers for the last several years. Now, Billy Edwards is throwing the ball at a 66% completion percentage, which is about 10 points higher than where Ethan Kaliakmanis is right now. He's got 14 touchdowns to 8 interceptions. He has been sacked 15 times, and he's thrown for 2,500 yards. So contrast that to Ethan. Ethan's a little bit lower as far as percentage yards and those things. But Billy Edwards is not so far ahead that it just makes it, near impossible for us to keep up. But we are going to see. Leading rusher for Maryland is Roman Hemby. But his leading rushing stats are still under 500 yards for the season. He is averaging 4.5 yards a carry, 5 touchdowns on the year. Ray is kind of that rotational back with him. He's got another 268, also averaging 4.5 yards a carry. And then you follow that up with McDonald, who's got 150 yards on the season, averaging 5.2, but obviously many less carries, only 29 carries. So they kind of have a platoon running back situation. Hemby, obviously the lead guy there. And their offensive line is playing decently, but part of that is because they open things up with the passing game. And Felton, by far their leading receiver, he was impressive against USC. He's an impressive player. 80 receptions this year for already 979 yards, so on the door of 1,000. Hopefully he doesn't, but it's looking like he may reach the 1,000-yard mark against Rutgers, averaging 12.2 a catch, 6 touchdowns for him. And then it goes down the list of talented receivers for Maryland. So, they are a team that can spit out points, can make you pay with big plays, can make you pay in the passing game, and can get you on your heels and run the ball well. And I think the key to this game is going to be Rutgers stopping the run, the way they were able to stifle Minnesota by holding them to, I believe it was very low. I mean, like 30-something yards on the ground. That's going to happen against Maryland to make them one-dimensional. But once you make them one-dimensional, it's a little bit different than Minnesota in that they can create a lot more plays like that. They're averaging 27.4 points a game. So that's a little above where Rutgers wants a team to be. If Rutgers wants to win, that means we've got to score close to 30 to win. Doable, yes, but you'd like to hold them a little bit below their average if you want to have a better chance at it. They are averaging 417 yards per game, so they're able to get yards, and they're getting yards after the catch, they're getting chunk yards, and they're a good team in that regard. Their turnover ratio's +1. They've lost some fumbles, obviously a few interceptions, but nothing too concerning for the quarterback there. 128 passing first downs, 57 rushing first downs. Their third down efficiency is 41%, so that's not bad. And their fourth down percentage is 45%. So this is a team that can convert, can drive, can score points, and can beat you on the perimeter with their playmakers. It's really going to come down to, is Rutgers' defense. Now, we tore it down to the studs, and we saw a much better pass rush. We saw guys who were much healthier. Tyreen Powell, Shiano said he's probably still only at 80%. But Tyreen Powell was in, a much better place, it looked like, against Minnesota. And Jabome then, because Powell's next to him and it's a constant, steady presence, I think really showed out, and he had his best game as a Scarlet Knight so far, Jabome. And he was a force. The tackles for loss were huge. You get a team off schedule, and it puts you in great position. Now, that's especially true against a Minnesota-type team, where if you get them off schedule and they've got to drop back to pass, you have a better shot at bringing the quarterback down, and you're less afraid of a huge play when you bring pressure than you would be against a team like Maryland when you bring pressure, and they can really make you pay. So it's going to be interesting to see how good that revamped defense can do against a team that presents problems. Is this a one-off situation where Minnesota was a better matchup for the Scarlet Knights, and we were coming off a bye week with a ton of time to prepare, study film, get a little bit healthy, fix some of those bumps and bruises, just be less sore? And now we're on a week turnaround again. Those bumps and bruises are back, and they're sore again, and you don't have the same amount of time to get a leg up on Maryland. We will see. Does a guy like Walker set that edge properly, and still is he able to put pressure on the quarterback? Is a guy like Jabome as effective against maybe what's a better, more potent rushing attack? And are these guys all better? Now, remember, we run this, 2 linebacker, 3 safety look a lot, and the corners did a better job against Minnesota. But you saw a lot of play out of guys like Salam, and you saw a young guy like Sanders in there. And you saw Flip Dixon, who still got, Shiano said he's still only at 80% or so. You saw those guys come out, and their presence was felt on the field, but they were also able to keep the offense in front of them a little bit, and especially because the linebacker play was so good in cabining the rushing attack of Minnesota. Are you going to see those same things, or is the intermediate passing game, is Maryland going to be able to utilize the intermediate passing game? Quick slants to get our middle of our defense off balance and rack up yards after the catch, which will affect you got to remember, when linebackers can play downhill, and even safeties can play downhill against the running game, they are going to be more successful in cabining the running game, and then it'll be more obvious passing downs where you're able to bring pressure, or the rush can get pressure on the quarterback, and the secondary and linebackers are more comfortable out there. If you get the linebacker core and even the safeties, especially in our system, off balance by running intermediate passing game and getting yards after the catch, which keep us on our heels a little bit, you then open up the running game, and things get really off balance and off kilter for our defense. So it's going to be interesting to see, was that a matchup-centric type performance against Minnesota, and was that, because we were a little bit healthier and had time to prepare? Or was that because we really found something that worked in terms of personnel, in terms of schematically, in terms of maybe consistently with who's on the field? We're going to see that against Maryland, because if Maryland comes out and gets our defense off balance, all of a sudden some of these guys that look so good against Minnesota might not look so comfortable anymore, and it might not be by virtue of their abilities or by virtue of their knowledge, but just by virtue of Maryland presenting a difficult matchup for us because of the way they play ball on the offensive side. I'm not as worried about our offense against Maryland's defense. Our offense has continued to evolve all season despite absorbing body blows by losing 2 tight ends, losing Kyle Monungai last week, different guys in and out of the wide receiver lineup. I thought Kirk Shiraka, in running such an abundance, many more 4 wide-out sets than he had used to, really put Minnesota off balance, and PJ Fleck admitted as much. we're not going to have that element of surprise again. Again, not coming off a bye week. Maryland will be ready for the 4 receiver sets. But honestly, and we got to check on the Needham injury. It didn't look good. And if Needham's out, now you're down another guy in the offensive line, and that's going to present problems. So now you're down 2 starters on the offensive line if that were to occur, and that's difficult too. So let's see what happens there, because that's your bookend on the other side of Pierce. So these things got to be looked at. But even with that and taking that into consideration, the line has gelled and melded a little bit more since the initial injury to Felter. They're not great, but they're still somebody, and Shiano said this too, they're still a unit that could bang with the Big Ten. They could exchange blows with Big Ten teams. So with that O-line, with Kyle hopefully back and hopefully fresh, and with the way Ethan Kaliakmanis has been playing and the amount of talent we have in the wide receiver ranks, especially as these guys like Duff and Long and Strong are continuing to develop and add an element to the team where this isn't just speed like a Long. This isn't just, tenacity and grit like a Dremel. This is a combination of everything. These are guys who are gritty, can go up for contested balls, but they're also big. They're big and they're fast, and even though they're young, these guys are adding another dimension to the offense. So I'm actually pretty confident in what our offense can do against the Terps. But the defense is what I'm most concerned about, as has been the story for most of the year. Maryland can do the things to us that we have suffered and struggled to deal with, even teams like UCLA did. And so I wouldn't look at the record of Maryland as much as I would look at how they won, how they lost, and how they play the game. And I do think that this is going to be a considerable test for Rutgers' defense going up against Maryland. Their quarterback's efficient. Their wide receivers are talented. Their running backs are talented. And we're going to have to stay on balance and keep it in front of us. It's not going to be easy. I think another thing to pay attention to is if guys get yards after the catch and we have to, guys get 20 yards, 30 yards, if we let a long pass go over our heads, how resilient is this defense? How often are they able to bend but not break and keep Maryland out of the end zone? And again, are they able to create turnovers like they did against Minnesota? A turnover here, a turnover there could swing the momentum of the game. And I'm confident in our offense that if we're able to get a turnover, Rutgers is going to be able to capitalize on that and score, especially if it changes the field position battle. But if Maryland gets out and just starts running us with the, intermediate passing game to get us off balance, which opens up the running game and is able to play the way against us that, some of the teams we've struggled the most with it's going to be a long day for us. Now, I don't think that I know Shiano will tell you and the Rutgers players will tell you, hey, we're just only focused on Maryland, trying to go 1-0 this week. I understand that. But if I was looking at all 4 of these games, I would say that regardless of who the better team is, because I think Illinois might be a better team than Maryland, and quite frankly, Minnesota might be the best team out of all the 4 that we had to go up against. So put that win in the bag. I think Maryland might be the toughest matchup for Rutgers out of the 4. And so even if it is a long day or even if we don't pull it out, I think there's a lot of optimism to be had for the final 2 games. But I'm not saying we're definitely going to lose this game. I'm just saying I don't love the matchup. But there is a chance. Now, if Rutgers can show that same type of hard-nosed football and guys like Jabome and Powell and the corner depth can play, guys like Walker on the edge and Keontae Hamilton, these guys who really stepped up against Minnesota, if that wasn't just because of matchup and wasn't just because of the bye week, if that was because they truly have turned a corner and they've figured out their roles better and they figured out something schematically that plays to their strengths or maybe personnel-wise that plays to their strengths, then maybe we can turn the page. And this Maryland game, if we can stop Maryland or we can keep them cabined to some extent, I think we have a good chance because I like how our offense is going to be able to play and I like the momentum and the growth I've seen from our offense. So all of that is going to matter going into this game, but we've got a 3-game losing streak. It hasn't been friendly to us over the last several years. They do have that. They don't have Tagovailoa anymore, but they still have a good quarterback who can make the right throws, who has, respectable stats this year, to say the least. They have good guys on the perimeter. They beat good teams. They've lost to good teams. It's going to be hopefully a dogfight. I think the key to it is control the pace of the game for Rutgers. Use Kyle Monungai. Use your offensive line and use an efficient passing game. You got Dremel and Miller in the slot. They're able to get open. They're able to convert and move the chains. You've got Strong and you've got Duff, who are big play capable, but also capable of moving the chains. You throw the ball anywhere within the radius of either of those two guys, and they can make a catch, even if it's not a perfect throw. You rely on those guys. You rely on your talented stable of running backs. See how healthy the offensive line is, but even if they're not, find ways to use all this talent you have. If you can control the pace of the game, if you're Rutgers, and keep Maryland playing kind of at your pace, you have a good shot at this game. If Maryland comes out and Maryland starts stacking up yards in the passing game and gets the defense on their heels and they control the pace of the game, where we have to meander and methodically work our way down the field on offense, but they can just, in the blink of an eye get down and march the field, it's going to be a long game. So a lot, we never know what to expect, but we've seen in recent years, it doesn't matter what Maryland has done elsewhere. The matchup against Rutgers is tough for us. So let's see what this defense can do. Let's see how much they've turned the corner. Either way, the season is looking up after the win against Minnesota. Let's finish. It's not what we expected, but there were a lot of injuries. There's still going to be a lot of postmortem after the season, but we're nowhere near the end of the season yet. So let's beat our rivals, the Terps. If you're going down to the game, send us your pictures. Give them a warm jersey welcome down there. Make your presence felt, and let's do this thing. Remember, guys, if you're listening on the audio version of this podcast, come on over to YouTube to Night Watch Larry K. Just search that on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel on YouTube. You get my post-game recaps. Sometimes they're on audio, but sometimes I just do a quick cell phone video. You can only get that on YouTube. If you guys are listening on YouTube, remember you can listen on the audio version anywhere you get your podcast. Just search Night Watch Larry K, and the audio version will be up. Make sure you subscribe if you're on YouTube. We got to get to 1,000 subscribers. I will say it till I'm blue in the face. I will say it till we get to that coveted 1K mark. And remember, if you know any sponsors, anybody who's interested in sponsoring the channel, very modest. It'll be easy to sponsor the channel because I'm just starting out, but I'm looking for sponsors. Anyway, reach out to me, click subscribe, and go RU. Larry K out.